Everything or anything was true, or nothing was true. The temporal emperor was the only God Rome knew. Life was cheap. Morality was whatever one desired to do. Paganism, barbarianism was the order of the day. Has Western civilization reverted? Have we become a pagan America? Gracious God of truth and justice, awaken us to our dilemma. We have a Bureau of Standards. We could not do business without a clear understanding of ounces and pounds, inches and feet, pints and gallons, minutes and hours. But we have no standards when it comes to morality and ethics. We have no God, not even a Caesar. We have become a godless, relativistic society. Help us become what we profess to be, one nation under God. We pray in his name, who is incarnate truth. Amen. God bless you, sir.
Clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., February 7, 1994. To the Senate. Under the provisions of Rule 1, Section 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Harlan Matthews, a senator from the state of Tennessee, to perform the duties of the chair. Signed, Robert C. Byrd, President Pro Tempore.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the Senate will now proceed to the consideration of S-1361, which the clerk will report.
Calendar 279, S-1361, a bill to establish a national framework for the development of school-to-work opportunity systems in all states and for other purposes.
There is a one-hour time agreement on the bill. Senator from Massachusetts.
Consent that the previous agreement governing the consideration bill be modified to permit me to modify the committee substitute on behalf of majority of the members of the Labor and Human Resource Committee.
Is there objection? Hearing none, so ordered.
And I send the modified substitute to the desk.
Clerk will report. And the committee's substitute is so modified.
Mr. President, the modifications so that the membership has an understanding deal with the new Section 504 that allow local partnerships to consolidate their federal funds from programs listed in the waiver section of Act 1, Chapter 1 for school-wide activities in schools in high-poverty areas. We followed a similar procedure in our Goals 2000 legislation. There's language that requires states to provide in their grant applications evidence that the relevant state agencies and the private sector support and agree with state development and implementation of grants proposal was removed. Instead, the review consideration was strengthened to require that secretaries give priority to applications that show the highest level of collaboration in developing and implementing the state plan and the highest levels of concurrence with the proposed plans by appropriate state agencies and private sectors. And that we'll have an opportunity to elaborate on that during the course of the debate. And then the partnerships applying for the state grants must show how they intend to get the employers involved in the development of the school-to-work programs. So those are basically the changes. There's a modification also by Senator Gregg with regards to allowing clergy to participate in the development of the process when states determine what geographical areas will be served by the school-to-work programs. We'll have an opportunity, and I know the senator from Illinois will expand on those proposals. First of all, Mr. President, I again want to thank my friend and colleague from Illinois, Senator Simon, who has been really the leader in the development both of this legislation and for his strong and continuing commitment in this area. I always enjoy working with the senator on legislation, particularly this kind of legislation that will impact most dramatically, I believe, the sons and daughters of working families and I enjoyed very much the opportunity to visit a school program in Chicago with him in the not-too-distant past, and have seen in a very important and practical way how this legislation can open up opportunities for young teenagers, and we'll have a chance to elaborate. I want to tell him I received wonderful letters from all of those students thanking us for the visit. We'll get back to talking about that program, I expect, during the course of the debate. Mr. President, how much time? We are under a tight time consideration, so I want to make sure that we understand where we are. How much time? There is a time agreement.
There is 1 hour equally divided allotted for this bill.
And then there's opportunity to debate various amendments to the committee substitute. Is that correct?
That is correct. Most amendments do not have a time agreement.
Good. Well, I'd yield myself 10 minutes, Mr. President. Mr. President, it's appropriate that we're taking up the School to Work Opportunities Act as we complete action on the Goals 2000 legislation, because the two measures closely complement each other. Together, they form the foundation for far-reaching reform in education system and in training our workforce. Building a world-class workforce starts with world-class school and education, and the Goals 2000 Act recognizes that we need to set high standards for all students in schools and provide incentives and opportunities to help them meet those standards. But the education and training of the workforce can't end at the schoolhouse door. In the highly competitive global economy in which we operate, education and training must be viewed as an ongoing process that continues throughout each worker's working life. The School to Work Opportunities Act addresses a major deficiency in our current education and training system: the lack of a coherent system to help students in school prepare for the world of work. We have the best higher education system in the world, and for those who go on to college, we offer a wealth of opportunity and a great deal of financial aid and other support. But we do virtually nothing for the vast numbers of high school students who do not go on to college, which is why this group is so aptly referred to as the forgotten half. High schools link their courses to college requirements. They advise students on the connection between academic achievement and college admission. They offer guidance to students in applying to colleges. But students who are not college-bound get virtually no help in relating their education to work opportunities. We don't motivate them to do well. We don't enable them to plan courses of study relevant to long-term career goals. We don't help them find suitable jobs or training programs when they leave school. Frequently, they are tracked, we should really say sidetracked, into watered-down general curriculum courses. Academic achievement is not expected, and the system hits them in the face with that stark reality at an early age. Although the majority of students work during their school years, there is no real link between their jobs and their studies. As a result, students who do not go on to college typically spend the first 5 or 6 years after high school moving from one dead-end job to another. By age 23 or 4, they may have enough work experience to be hired for a long-term job, but they have little more in the way of skills than they had when they were 18. Government spending helps to lock in these gross differentials. We spend an average of more than $10,000 in taxpayers' funds for each student who attends college, and an average of $15,000 for those who graduate from a 4-year college. In contrast, the average public expenditure after high school for non-college youth is only $1,500, 1/10 the amount for college graduates. This disparity has real consequence for students, not just in school, but for the rest of their working lives. Since the late 1970s, the differential between the wages of college-educated workforce and the high school-educated workforce has risen dramatically, as real wages for those without a college education have plummeted. Our legislation addresses this problem by helping states and localities work together with employers, schools, labor organizations, parents, and community groups to build school-to-work transition systems at the local level. Federal seed money will help these partnerships combine academic programs with supervised work experience and give students the opportunity to pursue career majors that will prepare them for work in particular occupations or industries. School-to-work programs developed under this legislation will emphasize work-based learning in the form of job training and paid work experience to provide students with job skills. They will also include career exploration, career counseling, and a program of study based on the academic and job skill standards under the Goals 2000 Act. Typical programs will involve at least 1 year of post-secondary education, will lead to a high school diploma, a certificate or diploma from a post-secondary institution, and an occupational skill certificate certifying mastery of specific occupational skills. Secretary Reich and Secretary Riley deserve great credit for their leadership in developing this initiative, and I also commend Senator Simon for the excellent job he has done in moving the legislation through the committee process. Based on hearings and the very helpful comments that we have received from a wide variety of individuals and groups who share the administration's commitment to improving the skills of our workforce, we have made improvements in the bill as it has moved through the committee process and to the Senate floor. But these changes do not alter the basic design of the bill as proposed by the administration or its essential elements. For the most part, these amendments are intended to clarify the goals the legislation seeks to achieve and to provide greater guidance to states and localities seeking grants as to the kinds of programs we are seeking to create at the state and local level. This legislation enjoys broad support among the business leaders, education experts, state and local government officials, labor unions, and community-based organizations. And I congratulate all those who've had a hand in fashioning the bill. I look forward to its enactment into law. We're very, very grateful for the excellent suggestions that we had from bipartisan members of our committee during the consideration of the legislation and also in the markup. We had the extraordinary occasion where we had the Secretary of Labor and the Secretary of Education commenting and interrelating both the Goals 2000 and the Schools to Work program so that we could have a common approach in terms of enhancing academic achievement and also providing skills for young people to move into a more constructive and a productive life. We've had the support of the Chamber of Commerce, the National Association of Manufacturers, and a number of the other groups which we will include in the record, and this is a continuum of the effort by, I think, the members of the Senate and the House, as well as the administration, in focusing on putting people, in this case the young people, first, with the expansion of the Head Start programs, with the reaching out, going down to the youngest of ages, actually to the prenatal kind of care. We're talking about enhancing the quality of those programs. We're talking about the Goals 2000. We're talking about the School to Work program. We're talking about involvement of national service programs in there. We're talking about direct loan programs that will help provide some savings to our young people. And we're talking about the tuition payback programs that will make it easier for our young people as well. And we're talking about the introductions of help and assistance in terms of technology into the classroom so that the young people will be technology current in terms of the progress that's being made in those areas. We are very, very grateful to all those for their cooperation and for their help, and it's entirely appropriate that both the Goals 2000 and the School to Work program are working really side by side as we hopefully will be taking action on these measures in the next couple of days. I withhold whatever balance of the 10 minutes I have and yield to the Senator from Illinois for whatever comments he makes.
President?
Senator from Illinois.
Yes, I yield myself 10 minutes. Mr. President, I am pleased to be part of the School to Work Opportunities proposal. And I want to commend Senator Kennedy for his leadership. Senator Kassebaum at this point is not supporting it, but she has been great in these education matters generally, and I appreciate that. Senator Wofford has been absolutely superb in this whole field. He has shown leadership in Pennsylvania on this, and I really appreciate his interest. Senator Jeffords and Hatfield and Durenberger all are co-sponsors, and they have been superb. This is just one piece of the education puzzle, as Senator Kennedy pointed out a number of things. But this is part of it. We talk about higher education, and that's clearly part of what we have to do. This is higher education spelled a little differently. This is H-I-R-E, higher education, where you learn as you work. And we have done this in some schools. As Senator Kennedy mentioned, he visited Senn High School along with me in Chicago, where we saw a program. I visited a suburban Milwaukee high school where they had a program in a graphics plant there. And at the college level, Northeastern University in Massachusetts has done a great deal of work. Berea College in Tennessee, in Kentucky, seeing the Tennessee presiding officer, I thought of Tennessee, right next to Tennessee in Kentucky. Blackburn College in Illinois have done this. We have to invest in our young people. The countries that are moving ahead are investing in education. That's one of the clear lessons as you look at the whole economic picture. And this calls for partnerships between schools, between educators, between labor unions, everyone working together. Educators tell me if you can get a student interested in one subject, that person will stay in school. And we have had testimony from young people about how they had a chance for a job, and all of a sudden, those courses in math or English made so much more sense to them. This does not, incidentally, create a new federal program. Senator Kennedy mentioned the cooperation of the Secretaries of Labor and Education on this. They are determined that shall not take place, and there is cooperation. I do not recall ever being visited by 2 cabinet members in my office at the same time on any subject. Both of them came in on this subject. We say that this has to be established from the ground up, building on state and local successes. We provide flexibility in this. We call for a partnership between business, education, and labor. And this is not another track for those who aren't going to college, but it does meet the needs of many who will not go to college. 75% of those who go to high school are not going to be getting bachelor's degrees, and yet we invest a disproportionate amount of our resources in the 25%. I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't invest in 25%, but we also have to be thinking about the 75%. This is something that can be available for all young people. In fact, some who are going on to college now have been part of this kind of a program. We also have language here to make sure there is no displacement. So you're not going to move a high school student in to take someone else's job. The bill establishes 4 types of startup grants. Development grants for all states to plan and create what is here. A 5-year implementation grants to get things started. Direct grants can be made to localities that are ready to move right away. And we encourage we don't have a set-aside specifically for poverty areas, but we encourage the use of some of the funds in the poverty areas. The 3 things that the program has to include is a work-based learning experience. It can't just be something where you're not learning. A school-based component, so we mesh the 2, and a connecting activities component. Originally, the bill required that we have pay for work, and it is interesting that both the labor unions and the business side suggested this was desirable. we worked out with Senator Thurman an amendment, because there has been some resistance to this, where paid work gets a priority. Real candidly, I think the experience is just overwhelming that when you're paid, both the student and the employer pay more attention to the responsibility. And so this is a practical compromise that we have worked out. We've also worked with Senator Tom Harkin, who has shown such leadership in the area of disabilities, to make sure that young people with disabilities have an opportunity. I cannot remember the last time I had a bill that was endorsed by the Chamber of Commerce, the Manufacturers Association, the labor unions, the Business Roundtable, the National Alliance of Business, the Service Employees International Union, the National Education Association, American Vocational Education Association, U.S. Conference of Mayors, and on, National Governors, Urban League, Wider Opportunities for Women, Council on Competitiveness. I am usually on the floor supporting Senator Kennedy on some controversial measure he has, or I seem to be attracted like flies to certain things, to controversial things. All of a sudden I have something here that is relatively non-controversial, and it's a pleasant experience for a change, I have to say. We call for demonstration projects. This, frankly, is an opportunity for the United States to develop its workforce. Secretary Reich has said very eloquently, if you are prepared, technology is your friend. If you are not prepared, technology is your enemy. We have too many people who are not prepared. This is a way of moving us forward. This is, again, as I said, one piece of the puzzle. There are no quick fixes in the area of education any more than there are in crime or any other major problem. But this is something that is significant. I would ask unanimous consent, Mr. President, to put into the record an article from an op-ed piece in the Washington Post by the chairman of the board of Circuit City Stores. And let me just read one paragraph from that op-ed piece. 2 years ago, I served on the Commission on the Skills of the American Workforce. The Commission concluded that without an effective system for moving young people from school to work, American businesses' need for work-ready, skilled employees soon would far surpass the number available. At the time, the Commission called for immediate action.
Without objection, it shall be made a part of the record.
This business leader says this is the kind of legislation that is needed for the future of our country. I recognize that there are concerns. That I would be pleased to yield, my colleague.
That commission, as I remember, the America's Choice was co-chaired by Senator Brock, who's one of our former colleagues, a Republican senator, chairman of the Republican Committee, Ray Marshall, who was the Secretary of Labor, President Carter, and was really brought together a remarkable group of both businessmen and representatives of the trade union movement. And as I remember in those hearings that we held on it, it was virtually unanimous in terms of the support for this kind of a project.
I thank my colleague for his observation. Not only was a remarkable group, as you point out, where Senator Brock and former Secretary Marshall were involved, it was a remarkable report, really spelling out where we have to go as a nation. I thought it was a great contribution. One of the things they call for is precisely the thing that we have here. Mr. President, I reserve the balance of my time.
Who yields time?
Mr. President.
The senator from Kansas. Excuse me.
Mr. President, the chairman, Senator Kennedy, and the senator from Illinois, Senator Simon, who's been such a long advocate of work-related and education issues, have spoken persuasively to why there is strong support on both sides of the aisle for the school-to-work legislation. I, too, care a great deal. I think we certainly acknowledge today the importance of being prepared, particularly for those students who will not be going on to a four-year higher education degree, and we need to enhance the stature of the professionalism of apprenticeship work. But I would just like for a few moments to speak to my concerns about this initiative, while at the same time acknowledging the efforts of the sponsors of this legislation to address some of the concerns that have been raised, and an issue of considerable importance, which is preparing our young people to succeed in highly skilled, highly competitive workplaces of the 21st century. I do intend to vote against this bill, and my opposition is based on my conviction that it compounds rather than corrects the deficiencies of current federal job training efforts. Just consider that we already have 154 separate job training programs on the books. By passing this bill, we will have 155. The federal government spends nearly $25 billion each year on these 154 job training programs, according to the General Accounting Office. Some of these efforts are clearly worthwhile. That's not the point. But overall, the present system simply doesn't work very well. We don't know what works well and what doesn't, and where we could better coordinate and mesh these efforts. The School to Work Opportunities Act is a prime example of why our current federal job training efforts are so disjointed. Each time Congress identifies a specific group in need of training, and in this case high school students, it creates a new program with new requirements and, of course, new funds. Creating new programs because we are disappointed with the effectiveness of the old ones is a time-honored tradition in Congress. Yielding yet again to this temptation is simply not the answer. We have to draw the line somewhere. We should not be debating whether we need more programs, but whether we need fewer and how to make those that we have work more efficiently. I have high regard for the fact that both Secretary Reich, the Secretary of Labor, and Secretary Riley, the Secretary of Education, are working closely together. We've long believed that this was an important combination, and the two of them are intent on seeing that it can work to a greater degree of coordination than has been possible in the past. But the School to Work bill claims to lay the groundwork for establishing a comprehensive system. I share the goal of creating a better integrated system to improve the transition from school to work. I do not share the view that this bill will necessarily accomplish that goal. The place to start is with existing programs. Congress already enacted a program aimed at the school-to-work transition. That was the Tech Prep program, for example, that was created for this purpose. For years, vocational education, through programs like Tech Prep, youth apprenticeships, and career academies, has been in the forefront of preparing students for the working world. I'm pleased we are now refocusing our attention to this very important effort. Vocational education for far too long was kind of regarded as an outcast over to the side, which you were involved in if you didn't or couldn't do anything else. But let's look at the right thing, and that is fixing a patchwork of job training system in desperate need of reform. This is why I chose to vote against S 1361. It's going to pass, and it will pass with significant support. But I argue that this is a new program, and supporters of it will say that it's not. Yet it has all the characteristics of a new one. It has an 8-year authorization. 8 years is a long time for an authorization. It has a separate pool of funds, $300 million for the first year and then such sums as necessary, and a separate string of eligibility requirements. It has been explained to me that the funds authorized in this bill are supposed to be used as, quote, glue money to bring existing programs into one system. If that is the case, I simply can't understand why it should cost hundreds of millions of dollars to integrate existing programs. If anything, consolidating programs should save money. Where precisely is this money going? As far as I can tell, it will not be going directly to schools or to businesses that participate or even to the students themselves. Rather, according to the bill, federal funds will be used, quote, as venture capital to underwrite the initial costs of planning and establishing statewide school-to-work opportunity systems. Just as an example, and the senator from Illinois, Senator Simon, listed some of these, there will be the state development grants, and then there will be the state implementation grants.